Hello again. In this session I'm going to talk about an extension to the communication process. We talked last time about the various verbal and non-verbal ways we communicate, and we concentrated on verbal skills, which are really important, but that's not to say written skills aren't just as important. In the business profession you're going to spend a lot of time writing information, and that doesn't mean SMS. So you're going to have to learn a whole new way of communicating in a business professional setting. Now I know you're all going to say, why is she talking to us about letters? We all know what a letter is. Well, I'm telling you, you don't. Because I've had many students come through to me in third year and have no idea how they should write a letter. So today I'm going to talk to you about that. Documents. We write various types of documents, whether it's a fax, whether it's an email, whether it's a report. Many ways of communicating, and they all have their own structures. So it's important to know in a written communication how you structure the communication. Reports are very different to writing a letter, or very different to writing a memorandum. These are all very different structures, and you'll need to be aware of all of them in the business setting. And of course, something that's being used far more now because we have social media is the use of Facebook, blogs, Instagram, which I'm sure you're all better at than I am. I'm probably the only living person who still doesn't have a Facebook page. However, I'm sure you all do, and I'm sure you all have blogs as well. But remember, blogs and Facebook and social media generally, yes, are being used by business, but the fundamentals of how we communicate in business haven't changed in a very long time. So, are there advantages to putting something in writing? You'll soon find out in business practice if there's some sort of negotiation goes on and you don't have it confirmed in writing, you leave yourself wide open to litigation and possible damages. So always good in any dialogue where there is a negotiation that you make sure you have written communication. 1, it creates a permanent record. 2, it allows you to store that information because believe it or not, you're going to come back to it, especially if something goes wrong. It's easily sent to other people. Whereas in a meeting or the like, if nobody's taking minutes, then there's no record of what was discussed. In a written communication, we all get the same information. When we're talking verbally, we all take different pieces of the message and interpret it in our own way. Written communication lays down principles. It lays down policies. It talks about how we as an organisation will behave and will require our employees to behave. And as I said, it is a permanent means of communication. Therefore, it's good for record maintenance. We have always a record of what has been said and proposed to be done. Now, I know I said I was coming back to the letter. Well, here it is. What goes in a letter? I'd be surprised if many of you can actually tell me that you have actually received a business letter or had to write one. Some of you may have. So for you, I apologise. But for the rest of you who have never seen one or had to write one, this will be invaluable. The first thing you'll see in any written business letter is a letterhead. That letterhead has a logo, the name of the company, its address, its telephone number, the date that you're writing the letter, as well as to whom are you writing it. This is called the header of the letter. Then we have a salutation. Dear madam, dear sir. If you know the person well, you may use their first name. But normally in business practice, we use dear sir or dear madam. And then we have the content of the letter. The first paragraph is the introduction. Why am I writing to you? The middle paragraph tells you about the actual communication I'm trying to make with you. What is this about? Why did I need to write to you? And these are the issues I need you to consider. The last paragraph is obviously one saying something like, I will contact you in a few days after you've read this letter, or please contact me. If it was giving advice, it might have a limitation of how long it lasts. If you're getting it from another business, it might tell you you can't rely on this information after a period of time, and it will tell you who to contact if you've got further inquiries. And then we have an ending salutation, and that is normally yours faithfully or yours sincerely. Now, depending again on the relationship you have with the person with whom you're communicating, you will choose one of those. Normally, if you've never met the person, it's a yours faithfully. If you've had some sort of past relationship, you will normally use yours sincerely. Now, there's many people I deal with in business who have known me over many years, and they tend to even breach away from that and use something like warm regards, kind regards, various other salutations. But that's because we have a personal relationship. That does not happen in your first engagement when you write to someone. Here's a sample letter that I've given you on the PowerPoint to show you what I'm talking about here. Now, this is a personal letter. This is not a business letter. Remember, at the end, she salutates by saying, "Love, Jenny." Well, I don't think you're going to do that with many of your bosses or your clients. Certainly not in the initial phases. So consequently, that's the type of letter you're most likely to have been familiar with. In your textbook, you will see samples of business letters. They're the ones I want you to become proficient in. I want you to know how you structure it, what goes in what paragraphs, what it should look like. Remember, this is your opening communication with a client. If you can't get this right, if there are errors in this, if you have not gone into fine detail to make sure it's correct, why would I be coming to you for advice? It would be unprofessional. So you must maintain professional language, professional structure, as well as an eye for detail in how you construct the letter. Now, when you're constructing the letter, there's various formats you can use. Some places you can be creative. Other places have strict templates about what font you'll use, what pitch you'll use, what type of margins are required. This is a branding exercise. Your company, your organisation will have a brand of how it wants to be perceived by third parties. And so the formatting will very much depend on the brand that your organisation wants to portray. What types of letters are there? Well, first of all, what's the purpose of the letter? Am I clarifying something? Am I merely writing something that's happened in the past and I'm confirming it? Are they minutes of meetings? Are they requests for information? Am I just maintaining file notes for historical records? Or is this a legal issue that I'm communicating about? So the type of letter I write will very much depend upon what the purpose was, as I said before. And there's a great deal of detail in your textbook in this chapter looking at the purposes and how you would respond in various circumstances. For instance, if I'm using a fax will have a very different look to a letter or to an email. And on the PowerPoint that's attached to this video, I've given you an example of what a fax might look like. You can see it's a far more informal way of communication. It has specific structure to it, but it's very much meant to be a succinct way of communication. There isn't that ability really to write in a very verbose way or in a very narrative way. It is much more used for quick communication in a very effective short time frame. Emails. Well, as the slide says, did you get my email? Well, many times we assume that because it goes from us that the recipient got it. Not always true. How many of you check your spam or your junk mail? Sometimes some very important emails end up where we never expected. So first of all, if you're looking at your emails, view them with a bit of suspicion that did the recipient actually receive your email? And that's why we often have confirmation ticks on our emails to say, yes, it's been opened, or yes, the person has read it. So often that's a way of getting around that. If you're using emails, be careful. Don't use abbreviations. Don't use SMS. Don't use jargon. Your client does not understand your corporate jargon, let alone your professional jargon. If we start talking about ACLAs and FOBs and STAs, that person has no idea what you're talking about. That is very ineffective communication. Many emails I get from students say things like, hey dude, how is it? I'm not dude, by the way. In an email, when you're doing it to a lecturer, you be respectful. And you write as though you were giving that person the respect they deserve. And believe me, in business, it's the same thing. Where necessary, email gives us the opportunity to attach other documents and other files, so it's very important that we make use of that particular facility if we want to add more information other than just an introduction at the beginning of the email. And with email, minimise sending jokes. I mean, I know everybody thinks this is a great way to send it into the cloud or the ether and somebody else will get a big joke out of it. 9 times out of 10, they didn't think it was funny. So in a business environment, minimise that. What you do outside, knock yourself out. But in a business environment, make sure you minimise the jokes. Reports. Now, if you're asked to write a report, it's very different to writing a letter. And there is a firm structure. And I don't know how many times students have said to me, what do you mean we write a report? Isn't that an essay? No. The answer is no. A report is not an essay. A report starts off with a very structured format. It has a title page. It has an executive summary. It has a table of contents because you want to be able to see what specific information is on what pages. It needs an introduction, the main body of the actual report, the conclusion, the recommendations, the references that you've chosen, and any appendices. Now, the executive summary is what it says. Summary. Should be 200 words, not 2,000. So make sure it's either in dot point or it's very specific. Table of contents should not be difficult. Mind you, I've been given many reports from students where they don't even put page numbers. How I reckon that's a table of contents is beyond me. So table of contents need to be broken down so that they're easy to navigate, but they must have page numbers. The introduction of the report is setting the scene. What's this report about? What have I looked at in this report? Why was this task given to us? The main body is your actual research and discussion around the topic. It's your findings from what you researched and investigated. And then you come up with a conclusion based on that research, based on those investigations. And again, after the conclusion, you need to make a recommendation. Should we do this? Should we do that? And that has to be based on the findings that you made in the main body. And lastly, but not least, you need to show references, credible references, not Wikipedia or Infopedia. References that are credentialised and generally accepted as an authority in the area. Referencing using Harvard or what other system you might choose, here we use the Harvard referencing system, is important. It's there for consistency and it's there for academic rigour. And of course, appendices are there to support the report because often reports have word limits in them. Appendices are not counted normally in word limits, but it gives you additional information that you might need to support the case that you're making in the report. Another written way of communication even is in a meeting. A presentation can be a written communication. If you're in a meeting and you're using flowcharts, lecturers tend to use whiteboards. We use PowerPoints. Guess what? That's written. That information is written down. That's still written communication, even though we might be verbalising it. So presentation skills are really important, and we hope to give you a lot of opportunity in this unit to develop those because students traditionally do not have good presentation skills, and so we want to encourage both the written and the verbal presentation skill. You, as I said before, are going to be really familiar with this next area, which is the blogs, the SMSs, who uses blogs, what percentage of people visit blog sites, and what sort of links there are. Most of you have probably got LinkedIn profiles as well. These are all great ways of written communication, but again, they're specific. Social media have specific requirements. And how you write is pretty much determined by the audience that you are actually writing to. Remember, in an academic frame, you will be writing in an academic way, and when you're in business, it will follow your business orientation. So the orientation changes depending upon who you're actually communicating with. And then we have the plethora of social media out there, which again, you all know about. And of course, on the last slide here, I'm showing you the various things or ways we communicate using social media. I particularly like the one because I think, therefore I blog. I mean, I've never ceased to be amazed at the things people write on social media about, well, I'm going now to have dinner, or I'm just going down the street to buy a drink. Sometimes you have to wonder who cares. There's also things like Instagram, about social media brands, about the various codes, the language you use, such as LOL. I always thought meant lots of love, but now I know it's laughing out loud. See, you didn't let me in on the secret. Unless the person actually understands the code you're using, it can convey a very different meaning. Believe me, be careful.